All right. I think it is just about 7:30, so we'll give people a couple minutes to kind of check in. It is 3:30 in Alaska. So, let's see, I'm gonna cut this. Hello, Jennifer and Kim and Melanie. Yeah, I just got home about 30 minutes ago. Started a load of laundry, emptied the dishwasher from last night. I'm good to go. All right. Oh, Kim. Well, merry belated Christmas. I'm glad you got it. I never know which one to send you. I figure I can tuck a couple in and then you've got things to play with at your end. All right. So we are going to be playing, for those that are tuning in at a later time, we are going to be playing with the jelly from the Shell-O set. I've got all of my markers close at hand. And I've got a couple other things. I've got a multi-liner. This is a Copic multi-liner. And you can use a different sketch pen if you want at the end, or if you know you have a compatible, Copic compatible one, you can use that as well, because we're going to be coloring up against it with our Copics. So I love this jellyfish too. His eyes just speak to me. I forgot to turn my phone on silent. We'll see how that goes. Oh, it did it on my phone. I did it from my watch. Yay, that worked. I always apologize because it's such right in the middle of the day. I don't know what time of day that would be better to avoid like all phone calls and not have something ring through. So hopefully we will not get disturbed. If something happens, I will get us right back up and running. Fret not. So I had a couple people when I did this ask about showing how to color this. And the one thing I can tell you about this one, it is all Copic coloring, except I did go back in with the black multi-liner for his pupils of his eyes. And then this is one of those cases where if you end up going over those little highlights, you could come back in with an opaque white at the very end. So if you have an opaque white, you can kind of keep that close, and a black sketch pen to do the pupils of the eyes, but everything else is done in Copic. I wanted to go for a no line image, but I also wanted to keep it really kind of, when I picture jellyfish in my head, it's these kind of really almost iridescent, kind of see-through, really light pinks and purples that you see at the zoo in the big, huge, aquariums of jellyfish. And so that's what I was going for. But you're going to use, the colors I used are really light. The only darker colors I used are actually in the background color. The rest of it is extremely light. So I've got a lot of colors that are ending in 0, ending in double zeros. I've got a couple that are ending with triple zeros. So I've got a whole series of stuff. What I would tell you is if you don't have these exact colors, because this is kind of tangenting off from my normal kind of set core group of markers. Thanks, Kim, for putting the stamp. And thank you for the sale on that. If you don't have this stamp set, Kim just put this group on sale. So this is the Shell-O set that we're using, and it's got the jelly. It's got a little crab and a turtle and your Crabalicious, let's Shallow-brate, Just Floating By, and Shallow. So those are on sale. So I was going for the no line, but I had to keep it really, really light. So I did use my light pink ink. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, I need to label mine because I forget every single time what this one is called. I believe it is Petal Pink. It's the super light pink. And I like this color, especially for no line coloring, because I feel like you can really make those lines disappear, or at least get really, really close to it. So if you do not have the exact colors that I am using, no biggie, but I am going to tell you, you're going to want ones that end in those zeros, double zeros, and even triple zeros, except for where we get right in, kind of right around his eyes, kind of right at his crease, or Pretty in Pink. Precious Pink or Pretty in Pink. Those are the two that you're looking for to get this really pale pink for no line coloring. Now you can use grays, you can use light browns, you can use a whole bunch of different things. As you get better with no line coloring, this is going to be harder to see, the light pink, but it's easier to make the lines disappear when you're using a light pink. So as you get better at it, that is what I would recommend. Now, if you've already stamped yours in black and you just want to get the same colors, that is great. And see, what I'm going to do, Kim, is I'm going to double check which one mine is, and I'm going to label it. I'm writing it, and I'm going to label it because I use it all the time. It is my go-to no line coloring ink. Okay, so we're going to start with the jelly, do the fun part first. And I've got a series of a couple of violets, and I've got a red violet as well that I'm using on his kind of main body. And then I'll show you, I'm going to do a little bit of blue violet on some of his tentacles, because he's got so much going on all these little wonderful tentacles that I wanted to make sure they didn't get lost, that you can still see all those different pieces. So I used some blue violets in there as well. So the three colors I'm going to start with are an RV 000, and I'm going to have a hard time without taking those caps off. So I've got an RV 000, which is a really light pink. And I've got an RV 01, and I've got a V04. All right, so I've got these three, and that is what I'm using for the majority of the jellyfish. And I am going to go from dark to light, so you can kind of see what order that's going to happen in. I'll kind of tuck them in at the side. So I'm going to start with that V04, go to the V01, and then in some of that with my RV 000. You are also going to see me use my colorless blender quite a bit on this one to really soften that up. So the areas I want this V04 is where he's going to end up being the darkest, but it's also going to help define his shape because he's so he's a jelly. So I'm going to come in, and a lot of times with no line, I will start with my darker color, and that's going to help me keep hold of some of these shapes so I don't lose them. And I'm going to come in between his little eyeballs. And then and I added a little bit of shape onto this guy so that it looks like this little ruff or ruffle kind of skirts out. See how right under his eyes it comes up? I kind of continued that up and down little wave to create a real distinct kind of crease where that is. And hello, hello to those that are joining us. And then the other place I'm going to put this darker color to start are right along kind of the bottom edge of this little skirt. And again, it's really just barely touching that edge. I know it's going to kind of be rounded and curled under. And that's going to help me define that a little bit and show his little shape, so I don't lose some of these fun little pieces. So that's my V04. And on the body or the head, that's where that's going to be. So next is my V01, and I'm going to start on the V04. And what that's going to do is it's going to help blend those two colors together and kind of pull it out into that white area. And I'm peeking over at my I have literally 3, you'd laugh at my setup today. I look like a computer geek / nerd. I've got 3 things set up on my desk today. I have my laptop where I am watching for comments and questions, so I catch as many as I can. I have in front of my nose and recording our video is my phone. It's literally like 3 inches from my nose. So sorry. And then I also have my iPad set up to my left because I have already given this card away. And it was one that I needed to send to someone who would really appreciate it because I loved how it turned out. But I wanted to get you guys as close as I could to the original. And so I had to pull it up and have it beside me so we could get fairly close. I'm going to turn this guy a little bit, and I'm going to bring this V01 kind of all the way around. And there's a little bit of white left. And then you can see I also softened these little pieces, and there's a little bit of white right at the top of those curves. So I'm not done with these colors, but I'll come back to them. And then I've got this RV000, and that is going to go right on top of the V01 and into that white area even further. Now, a couple options here. You can leave some white showing. That's going to be kind of a choice that I'm leaving up to you. If you want a brighter white highlight, a little more translucent. But I'm going to hit most of those white areas with this RV000. And it's almost completely white, like there's barely any color there. So that's going to be kind of up to you, the look that you would like. And then the only place I am going to hit with my colorless blender on his little face is kind of right up on the top of his little bulb here, just to soften that right into white. And I think I'm going to leave these, and I'm going to give them just a little more definition here in just a second, but I want to let that dry a little bit, because if I hit it right now, it's going to just kind of smear and pull out because that ink is pretty darn wet. So while I'm waiting just a second, I'm going to grab my Copic multiliner, and this is a 0.3. Normally for this, I would grab something smaller. Actually, I have a smaller one. So these come in all different sizes. This is a 0.05, which is really small. And the part that I'm aiming for is the pupil of the eye. So it's not the very inner circle, and it's also not the outer ring. It's the one in between. So I'm considering that inner circle a highlight. and I'm actually going to go all the way around the highlight. You don't necessarily have to, the way it's bumped up to an edge. And then I've got that outer ring that's left behind, and that's going to get some color added to it for the iris of his eye. And I tend to like working with a super tiny multi-liner on this, just because it gives me a little more control. And it takes a little longer to fill in, but then as I close in on that little highlight, I have a little more control over that. And they do not need to be exactly the same. In fact, I think he is a little bit googly-eyed. And so if these are a little bit uneven, like height, if they're a little bit wandering, that actually adds even more character. So I'm all about the googly eyes. All right. So now this is the other thing, that if you use any sort of sketch pen, you want to make sure it's Copic safe. But if I immediately go in and go over this now with a Copic, my guess is it's going to smear. So I do want to give that section a little bit of time to dry too, as well. I have a few more people joining in. Hi, Marianne and Pam, and I think I missed one more. But I'm glad you guys are able to join us. We aren't too far along. We're just doing this little jelly. All right, I'm going to go back to my V01, and the only thing I'm going to do is I want to get a little bit right along this top edge. I had a little bit of bleeding, and that's okay. But I want to kind of curve this around. And it's going to soften that a little bit more where it bled down into that. Okay. Awesome. So the only couple pieces on him is I've got these fun little, like up on his head, is I've got his eyes, and then I've also got these like little eyebrows and the little tentacles or little pieces up on top. Now I used my Copic marker. If you are not super confident with your pressure, you could do a couple different things. So I'm gonna actually, I'll tell you that. I'm gonna use the brush nib, and I'm gonna really, really lightly go over the two eyebrows so it really matches him. And I'm gonna do the same thing on his little tendrils up here. Now, two things. You could get a multi-liner or a sketch pen. Because I'm working on top of the Copic, you could do a sketch pen in that color and just do those fine lines with that. Or another option for a lot of people, they can use their chisel nib or the medium broad nib. Excuse all the excess stuff on this paper. But if I use one of these little teeny tiny tips, this is a stiffer nib. It doesn't have the flex. And so I can get up way up on one of those little tiny corners, and my pressure isn't as big a deal. If I'm accidentally pushing a little bit harder, it's not going to create a thicker line like the brush nib. Where the brush nib, because it's so soft, you see people really struggle kind of with a little bit of a shake or keeping that super narrow. So that's one option. Or if you have different sketch markers, and you can get a multi-liner in a purple and a violet, that's an option. So the next part is all these little tendrils, and I kind of divided my tendrils into two. I've got these wiggly ones that go back and forth that seem to have a seam that goes right down the middle of them. And there's 1, 2, 3 of those. And then we've got all these little tendrils coming down the back. You can see what I'm doing with my hands in front of my body, of course. Sorry, they have all these little tendrils. I'm doing this in front of me that come down the back. And those are going to be a different color. And that's going to help create that depth of these ones that are forward and these ones that are to the back. So we're going to create this difference between those forward and back ones by truly doing kind of a different color on the two of them. So I'm going to start actually with the back ones, because that's going to help me find those front ones and know where to color. So I'm actually going to base them in a BV20. So I'm switching this up completely. And if I need a little more pink, I'll go back. But the ones I'm looking for are these little skinny guys that kind of wave down the back. And I'm just going to start very slowly finding each of these guys. There is no hurry. So then this one is one of those wiggly ones to the front. Looks like we've got another one that overlaps behind and comes down here. And I am going to layer some more colors with this so it doesn't get so gray, but this is going to help me find them. It's fun. One of the fun things about Copic to me is I can really layer color. Just because I've started with this gray, this blue violet that's has a lot more gray in it, doesn't mean that's where it's going to finish, but it's going to help me find these particular little tendrils and keep them separate. And it looks like I've got one more, at least from the top. This is another one of those images that I'm going to get almost finished and realize, oh, there's one more piece tucked in over here and I missed it. Okay. Quick scan. I think I found them all. So I'm going to do two things. Melanie thinks I need a fourth device so that I can use a split screen with a full body shot. Oh yeah, because you want one of me too, being entertaining. You'll laugh, Melanie. I actually recorded an entire video with one camera on me and one camera on my desk for a different company because they wanted shots of me talking to the camera. So I'm looking back and forth between my work and this camera. It was the most insane. It's just a different way to teach. It's a whole different way to think about it. So on all of these ones that I just colored, I'm not super concerned about like the shading or like blending. And so that's why I'm going slow, because it's giving me time to think. But I do want to brighten them up just like one little teeny tiny notch. So I'm going to try the V01. I think this is what I used on him. Yeah. And it's not going to change it a whole lot, but it's going to make sure to keep that color going that we started with. And then we'll have one more step on each of these. So with this V01, I'm actually going over the entire thing. It's just creating a new color. This is not a color that's in the Copic world, but it's the one I wanted for my tendrils. So I'm layering two colors to get me where I want to go. So what hopefully at the end this will look like is that it's the same color as the jellyfish, the jelly. It just is sitting to the back a little bit. And when we color these ones to the front, it will look even more so like that. So the last thing I need to do though is show that some of them are weaving in and out. So now what I'm looking for is where it's coming out from behind, where we see it peeking out from behind another piece. And that means up top, and it also means behind these other tendrils. So I've grabbed a BV23, and I'm going to start where it is obvious. This is coming out from under his little body. Out from under, out from under, out from under, and out from under. Then as I work my way down, there's places where then it's coming kind of peeking out from under these other tendrils or even each other. So I'm going to kind of show these places where it's coming. And you can kind of think of it that like this tendril in front, not that there's a real distinct light source under the water where this little jelly is living, but that because there's one sitting on top of it, it's creating that kind of shadow effect. And then let's see, where else? Over here, just kind of working our way around. And this is that BV23. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to do is on a couple little spots where it dips way in, I'll go ahead and add just a little bit more spot there. And see, this is where I keep finding little, oh, there, you know, push in there, push in there. And I think for me, again, this is an artistic choice. I don't necessarily want to blend it smooth, but I'd like it a little bit softer than it is right now. So I'm going to go back to my BV20, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to go right at that edge of some of these BV23s. And the spots I'm looking for are these ones that go into those longer, lighter sections so that they are a little bit softer. It's not quite as hard a transition. The fun part about hitting anything with a second round of BV20 is now we're going to get some separation of color. This is a color which you can call it shattering or kind of pulling apart. The blue and the violet on this particular color pull apart. So when I hit it a second time with the BV20, sometimes we get this effect of kind of a little bit of blue and a little bit of violet kind of pulling apart. All right, so this looks a little messy right now. It's kind of a mishmash. But now we're going to come in and put our other tendrils right on top, these wider ones, the wiggly ones, and I think you're going to see how that's going to read a lot better. So on these guys, I think I'm going to actually start, I'm not going to lose any lines, so I am going to start with my lightest color, and these are the same colors I used on the jelly's head. So this is my RV000. All the way down, and I'm going to do that on all three. The colors I picked are ones that blend really easily together, purposely so, and that way I can do all of these kind of at the same time. I don't need to worry about it drying and not being able to get things to blend the way I want them to. That, and I'm not doing some major huge blends. All right, then I've got my V01, and I definitely want to get darker up underneath. This is as much as anything going to just add some of that violet in. So I'm not super picky. I'm going to go right down the center of each of these. I can hit some of these bends a little bit more. The next color is going to give it even more oomph. All right, so mostly down the center of these guys. I always reserve the right to come back and do more of anything. So now this is where this is going to really change the look of this. We're going to come right up underneath. And then I am going to come and kind of accentuate a little bit that center seam. I'm not going to hit all of it, but I'm kind of skittering along. But I want to get nice and dark up at the top where it's coming out. And we'll soften that, so don't worry if you feel like it got a little too dark down the length of the tendril. We will definitely soften that a little bit as we add a couple more layers. Now, for me, I want to make sure this all looks like it's happening underneath the jelly's head. So I am going to go back with some of my blue violets. I'm going to start with the BV23, and it's going to go right up the very top of that tendril. And it doesn't come down very far, maybe somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to switch to the BV20, and that's going to come just barely further out. Then the last thing I am going to do is I'm going to go back to that V01, and this is where I can kind of play around with if I want to soften that center little line that I created. Look how fun this looks. So I'm going to come down and kind of accentuate maybe 1/2 of the tendril, kind of hit one side and run right up against that V04. But you can see the difference between the two now, what that's done to that. And it just makes it a little more floaty and transparent. But it's also going to help me soften what I did at the top with those darker colors. All right. Come down and do the same. Soften these guys up. All right. So the last thing on him is his little eyeballs, because we were waiting for that black to dry. And I used a couple of the colors that were going to be in the background. So I used some blue greens. And actually, I think I used the 2 blues that I had. So I'm going to use a B16, so they're really bright. And that's going to go from the bottom of the iris kind of up. And then I actually used a B39, which is almost black. And I did that from the top down, and then I'm going to have to hit it with the lighter blue again. Smush them together. There we go. All right. So then the background, because we're doing the whole effect here, I really wanted it to look like it was kind of glowing. Thank you, Carla. And so what I decided to do, he has kind of a little bit of a yellow highlight kind of right around him, and then it goes into white, and then it goes into blue. So for these, a lot of times it's actually easier to work. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually easier sometimes to work from the dark into the light. So you guys can kind of see what I ended up doing kind of on my side card just to kind of get the effect. So I'm working with a couple of blue greens. This is a BG57 and then a BG53. And then I switched all the way down to a BG000. And I'll do it here. And then you've got the colorless blender. And then in my practice run, I thought about using a neon color, but it ended up was like, this is a little more than what I was bargaining for. So I ended up using a Y000, which gave it just enough of a glow. And against that purple, especially because, I mean, if you bring this card over, because we're doing violet and yellow, it's going to pop no matter what. And so the neon is a little over the top. It's a little more than you need. All right. Thank you, Margaret and Pam and Kim. Much appreciated. So you could start at either end, and because we're going with the colorless blender in between, you really could. You could start with your shape around, and we could do that. So let's start with our shape, which is going to be that Y. And my goal is to kind of hit, and because this is so light, I can even kind of give myself this. I'm going to do literally kind of a bubble around his head. This is my goal. So as I come from him and work my way out, I want to go a little past that. So I'm going to flick from my little guy, and I'm going to be careful around his little tendrils so I don't smush them. And I'm going to use that ring that I gave myself, because it doesn't need to be a perfect circle, but I'm aiming for a circle. I have discovered along the way that you need to have an actual shape, not just kind of an amorphous, don't just kind of, oh, it's around him, and so then suddenly it's the shape of the jelly's head. Give it an actual shape, an oval, a circle. You will be happier with it in the end. I promise. This is from experience. All right. So this is going to give me kind of this little glow. Hit a couple of these little spots around him. And then I'm going to work in towards that circle. So my outer edge is my darkest BG57. And what we're going to do is this top half. I'm trying to think what time it is. Oh, we're okay. Okay. Because we've got this, and then we've got the bubbles. We want to talk a little bit about the bubbles before we end, right? So my dark ended up primarily being around the top, but you could do it all the way. I mean, you could give yourself about that, 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, and you could go all the way around. Mine stayed, for the card purpose, it stayed a little bit higher up, the darkest portion. So I'm just going to kind of keep going the way I went on my original BG53. This is where I need to put it so the shadow's not in the way, but now it's in the way of my hand. So I'm struggling, sorry. So again, we're going to start on the darker color and flick in towards that light. We're trying to leave white in between. Let's go ahead and bring this guy. And remember, we can always go back and forth. So if you leave it further out, you can always come back. Just because you started further out on your edge doesn't mean you can't pull that in now. Copic is a very easily manipulated medium. I shouldn't say easy, because that's gonna, I know it's not easy. It is a medium that you can manipulate and get it to do a lot of things that you want it to. And you can go back and change it. I think that's a better way of saying what I meant to be saying. It has some willingness to move. You can get it to do some things even after the fact. So I'm not going to worry too much about all this tendril stuff going on right now. I'm going to go down around the outer edge so that that ends up being kind of all wet at the same time. Because I can go back and fill that in, and it's not going to look like I did it at a different time. I need this outer part kind of all, so it doesn't have the starts and stops. La, la, la. Isn't this the best part when someone's like filling in this huge area and you're like, oh my gosh, painful. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I could entertain you with. Snort. So we had a windstorm here. I don't know if anyone watches like natural disasters and things that are going on in the world. So the area that I live in Alaska was actually hit by a windstorm that was the 4th largest that they've ever had a weekend ago. And it literally does look like kind of tornado hit our area. There's people that lost roofs and all sorts of damage. We did have some house damage. It's like not as bad as others, so we're okay. But we lost a garage door and all this stuff. So we're playing with that. That's what we're dealing with. Okay. So I'm not worried super much about trying to get up into here right now. I can kind of keep working on that here in a second, but I'm going to switch to my B000 because I do want to get this area up here wet. And I might have to do a little back and forth because I stepped away from that for a little while. But it's moving. And I might have to go all the way out. See how I'm going all the way out to the edge? Sometimes, even if I'm not trying to lighten that, I have to get this all wet. Because if I don't, I end up with those watermarks where you see the dry hitting the wet. So on occasion, dry throat, you do have to go back in. So I barely have any white left. I'm like a tiny bit in between my yellow and my blue-green at this point. And that is okay. Because what'll happen is as soon as I kind of make my way around, I'm going to grab my colorless blender. And I can sit right in between the two. So it's hitting the yellow. It's also hitting that blue-green. There's some lines that are here happening over here. If you can see those, it literally is an image that's on the back of my paper. I firmly believe, especially if I'm using the Express It blending card and reusing, if I am not going to use the image on one side, I will stamp or print on the other side. And the only time anybody knows about it is when I do a coloring tutorial and it gets wet and you can see it. Other than that, you would never know that there's an image back there. So I am all about getting the value out of my paper, especially the expensive stuff. Okay. But now we've got this kind of fun glow that happens around him, and we can do the same thing. I would do the same thing. I'm not going to worry so much about all the layers, but I would bring the BG53 up to about here, do a little bit with the BG 000, and you're not going to have to work that super hard because it's such tiny areas. You're going to give the hint of it. But let's do a couple bubbles, and then if we have time, we'll finish that up. So I used a couple colors on my bubbles, and I'm going to show you on some of the bigger ones so you can kind of see a little bit better. So I used in colors that we already have on the table, nothing more coming out. So I used my V04 and I went across kind of 1/2 of my bubble around the edge. And then I used, where did it go? BV20 around the other half. And then I came in with my colorless blender and circled right in the center. And it does some fun things. It blends the two together right at those corners. And because the V04, even though it's a dark color, it melts like butter. It's like you hit it with that colorless butter and it goes, just spreads. So it does this wonderful blend effect. But then because we use that, remember the BV20, remember the trick? Now we've got this blue and the violet happening on that bottom half. So literally on all of these bubbles, and you could play around with how much of the violet, how little of the violet. Once you have this done, you could then go in and play even more and put like something shiny on top of it. A lot of times I'll go in just even with glossy accents or something clear just on the bubbles, and that's kind of fun. But that's all I did. It's literally just the two colors, kind of top. And notice mine are definitely not perfect. Not perfect by any means. Not about perfection. But it is kind of fun that these were included in this image. And so to me, it's worth kind of coming back in and giving them a little touch. And I like too that even with this no line image, the bubbles are very forgiving. Like they're not super hard to avoid. And because I've done the whole image so light, they still end up popping. And it's a really simple, and you can do water droplets and bubbles really complicated. This is the, I don't want to take that much time version, right? Fun, quick. And I can always let it sit and dry and come back and hit it again. I'm all about that too, playing around with that. So if you guys have questions, I'll keep coloring. I'm going to go ahead and work up, I think. And I'll have to do a little play around because I did let this dry. So I'll have to play around a little bit at the bottom here. But we'll go ahead and bring some of this up, because I think the tendrils actually look a lot better to me once I get that color in behind them. It helps them really get defined. And that's the thing about no line. I mean, there's no black edge. There's nothing, there's no cheat kind of stopping my ink. It's just kind of sitting there, and you hope you've defined the edges well, but adding that background in, look at what happens. Those tendrils now pop and we can really see them all. And so don't give up on it. Give yourself all the way to the finish. My guess is you're just fine, but you have to get it finished. You have to get that background in there too. There's a lot of artists that will do the background first because they feel like that does help with the edges, and it's hard once you've colored all these little tendrils to come back in and work around them. So you guys can figure out kind of what works for you. I will do one way one time and one way the next. So I do a lot of different, whatever works for a single image and what I'm up to that day. I'm not going to tell you one way is the way to do it. Just not my style. Well, thank you, Pam. So my goal has always been, because I've been teaching Copic for a really long time. So if you guys don't know me, if you're new to this a little bit, I've actually been teaching Copic for, I'm trying to think, my oldest is 19. So I've been teaching Copic markers for about 16, 17 years, like that. So I've been teaching people how to use these guys for a really long time. And we joke about it. I joke about it when I teach art. My job is to make it look easy and fun. But I've been doing this. This is what I do. So it should look easy and fun when I do it. It does take time to get to that level. And kind of evaluating what's not working. How can I make that work better? So focusing on how to improve your coloring skills, I think helps. All right. we have about 10 minutes left, but that is our jelly from Shell-O. And you can do a couple things. I'm looking at my original and kind of looking at the differences. Every time I color something, it looks different. The second time I color it, the third time I color it, the fourth time I color it, it's always going to look different. I think I did some darker, I really went in and defined a couple of spots. One is really right up in here. I really hit that pretty hard. So I could go back in and push that even further. I just liked how it has that distinct look. The other place is right above that little ruffle. I think I hit it a second time with my V04 right along that edge. And again, it's more about, I like a pretty high contrast, kind of in your face, really distinct look sometimes. And so I think that was me doing that. Yeah. All right. So there we go. A little jelly from Shell-O. Super fun. If you guys have questions for me ever about Copic, you can always ask in the Craft and Kimmy stamp Craft and Friends group, our Facebook group. If you will tag me, just tag Michelle Houghton, and that way I will get pinged and make sure to get those questions. If there are things that you would like to see in future tutorials, I always am looking for ideas. I'm more than happy. We did a whole series on skin. We did a series on skin. We did a series on hair. But if there was something else like that you guys would like some more actual kind of tips and tutorials, again, if you ping me with my name, we'll kind of add it to the list. I know this one was a specific request when this one came out last year. We've been busy doing the skin and hair and some other things, so we finally made it back around. Anyway, you guys let me know. Thanks for those of you who were able to touch base tonight. And if you're watching this on the replay, thanks for coming in and checking it out. And make sure this week is release week, and you guys are going to like it. Fun stuff coming out starting on Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember. I think it might be Wednesday this week. But fun new things releasing for January 2022, believe it or not. You guys have a great night, and I will get this up so you guys can watch it in the replay. Have a good one.